Tall Can Audio.
What's happening, everybody? Welcome inside an all-new episode of the Tall Can Audio podcast. We're on social media at Tall Can Audio. Give us a follow there. We'd love to hear what you guys think about everything we're talking about here, and make sure you're subscribed wherever you're hearing us right now. My name is Matt Robinson, and happy to be alongside today our buddy Steve Bundo. What's happening, man?
Oh, Matty, I'm good. What's going on with you? How you doing?
You know how it's been, man. I've kind of been posted up here, out of Dodge for a little bit, but that's coming to an end. This is the last show from the TCA satellite studio for now. Got to head back to the city here in the next day or two. So, but other than that, man, I know, because now it's 30 degrees and, you want to be here. But, what are you going to do, right? Real life's calling, so.
Oh, it's true, but you know what? Who cares?
Sometimes
enjoy the lake, crack open another one, and just jump in, bud.
Man, that's been rough here, right? Like almost every day, you feel like you're having one too many, two too many, whatever. I may need to try out a little when I get back to town. We'll see.
No such thing. How can you not with this kind of weather? You need to stay hydrated, right, buddy?
That's all it is, man. That's all I'm doing. I'm just trying to stay hydrated, right? So, we got a ton of things to cover today. We got a new general manager for the Leafs. You've been hovering around REDBLACKS training camp. Stanley Cup Final is set. Look, we can talk about a bunch of different things, but we always start in the same place, and I know that you know the drill. So what have you brought to the table today, man?
That's right, Matty. I know the drill, and what I'm drinking right now is going to be the Waterloo Guava Lime Radler. I went into the beer store and I noticed, it's not very strong. It's only 2.5%, even less than I thought. So it's kind of not even a beer. I'm basically drinking juice. But it's got a really cool can, and they had a couple radlers. They have a tart cherry one, and now, like I said, a guava lime. But Waterloo makes some good radlers, and they're perfect for when you're golfing. It's not too high, and alcohol percentage tastes great. It's very refreshing. You get a little bit of a fruity taste into it. I thought it was a little bit higher percentage than this, so I do feel a bit weak, Matt. You can chirp. You can go ahead and chirp. I don't feel that great about it now, but the can, like I said, looks great. It's green. It's pink. There's a warthog on it. There's guavas on it. It looks awesome. So I'm going to crack one of these and just, feel free to have at her on me.
You know what? I maybe I spoke a little too soon saying you know the drill, but you have always come in strong with the beers here, so I'm going to let you off the hook. And like you said, when it's 30 degrees like this, and as you said, like sometimes something like that just goes down kind of nice. I got no beef with that, man.
And it tastes good too, Matt. That's a good.
Yeah, and Waterloo makes nice stuff, right? Like all over.
Yeah.
The place, so.
No, I love their IPAs. I like a lot of their stuff. So when I went into the beer store and I see the fella, he was like he was putting out all the beer, but he was stocking the wall. It was like a power wall, and the colors are everywhere, and he's got all the cans, all like it's filled. I walked in, I felt like a dick for just going in to grab a beer, and I'm like, man, this looks great. But all of these Waterloo, like the Waterloo cans, they looked so good, and I'm like, you know what? So I grabbed a couple. I grabbed an IPA, grabbed the Radlers, and then I grabbed a couple others, and I was like, okay, but it tastes really good. So I could have went with the IPA that's in the fridge right now, but I'm not going to lie to you, even though no one can see us.
That's true. That wall that you're talking about that so often exists in so many beer stores and so many LCBOs, it reminds me, as now a grown man, as I'm sitting there looking at all these beers, what am I going to choose? It reminds me of being a kid standing at like Walmart or wherever in the video like in the electronics section, staring at all the video games behind the locked case that you'd have to wait for someone to come and unlock and get, but you're just like looking at all of them. Which one am I going to get? What am I going to do, man? That's the way I feel now, standing in front of that wall at the LCBO. And as you say, often those guys work hard to make it look nice, and you're just like, screw that, I'm taking this one and that one and this one.
Well, that's where I felt bad. I used to be a stock boy at Giant Tiger back in high school, and usually you wait to the last like half hour. This guy was doing it in the afternoon though, so I didn't feel as bad.
Okay,
but,
yeah.
As I go in and I grab a couple of beers, it's like, I did feel bad because, like I said, when I was at Giant Tiger and it was like, all right, last half hour, everybody go face. So you pull all the products to the front of the shelf so it looks really nice and colorful. And so when I did that to him, I thought though, Matt, you were going to go even more old school and talk about, how I said the power wall, right? You walk into the fridge and you go in and they all look beautiful. But I believe they used to call power walls when you'd walk into small like convenience stores or whatever it was, and the cigarette walls, right? Those I believe were called power walls, and that's why they had to start covering them up, because they didn't want kids seeing them, because it's all colorful. It's all these things. What's behind the counter?
Yeah, now
so that's
it's all
where
cancerous lungs and warning labels. They don't look anywhere near as nice on the wall, right? So,
do you even know anyone that smokes cigarettes anymore? I swear to God, you walk down the street and it's everybody that smokes a vape or whatever. I don't even notice people smoking cigarettes anymore.
No, it's true. I don't know if I do. For a while, like, and even when I was in high school, like, there were kids who smoked, and I knew a couple of them or whatever, but it was clearly even then on the decline. And I like, part of it has just been the fact that they tax the hell out of you now, right? Like, it's so expensive to smoke. But I know one guy who, I don't know if you're into the vape thing, and who knows who I'm risking offending here as a listener, but I sort of understand the idea of vaping if you're still like a cheese-eating high school kid. I kind of get it. And I sort of understand the idea of vaping if you're someone who's trying to quit smoking. I understand that there's like a habit, right, that this sort of helps fulfill, and it's not quite as bad. I kind of get that. But I know a guy who never smoked a cigarette in his entire life, who at like 34 years old just decided one day, yeah, now I'm going to vape. And I was just sort of like, I don't know. I look at that guy now as like a cheese-eating high school kid. Like, it's odd, man. I don't know why all of a sudden he decided, well, I guess all the cool kids are doing it. I'm like, yeah, but you're old enough to be their parents, man. Like,
it's true. Yeah, no, I got nothing against. It's not my cup of tea. I don't like that stuff, but if people want to do it, that's cool. But it's just like I said, it's just a couple of older people I know that maybe still smoke.
Yeah.
But I don't know a lot of people my age or younger that I've ever seen go in and ask for cigarettes.
Same, man. Yeah.
It's an interesting thing. So I'm going to change the power wall from the cigarette wall to the beer store wall when it's freshly faced.
I like that.
Great.
I got one here, man. While I've been up at the lake, I was touring around on Saturday, actually with my uncle and some family out on his boat. We went into Fenland Falls for dinner and a couple beers, and that is home, not surprisingly, to the Fenland Falls Brewing Company. And so on the way back to the boat, you're walking right by it. Well, obviously, I have to go in here and pick up a couple of things. So one of the ones I grabbed is called their Tropical Stout. And that was fascinating to me. You know me, man. I'm a dark beer guy. I like stouts. And I sort of figured there's almost no indication here on the label. And as always, we'll post the beer at Tall Can Audio on Instagram. But there's no indication here about what is supposed to make this stout tropical. I assumed there'd be like maybe some tangerine, right, or pineapple to it or something. And so I came back and I'm looking it up on that Untapped app, and there's just no information there about it. And I looked it up on the Fenland Falls Brewing Company website, and all it says there is that like this stout made with British malts is good for all seasons. And so it sort of feels to me, man, like this is just their stout with a different label on it in the summer. You know, it's their winter stout that they're just trying to sell off what's left. I like a good stout either way, so I'm not going to hold that against them, but I'm not expecting anything here that's going to make it feel overly tropical. But it's clocking in at 5.6%. It's in a big 500 ml bottle here. So that's what I'm rolling with on this one, man.
No, I'm happy that you're probably not getting hosed. No. But like I've noticed the last few times, like you say, yeah, I like the stouts. I'm not going to complain, but like I feel like the last few times we've done shows, you're usually kicking around a good stout. So
yeah,
you've been on a little stout kick when I've been on the show, so that's pretty good. But I find the difference in the summertime for a lot of them is it'll just be a lot smoother.
Yeah.
Like one of my favorites was like a toffee coffee crisp.
Nice.
Is what it was.
Yeah.
And it was done by Weatherhead in Perth, which it's no longer Weatherhead. But at the time, and it was
Lake Town or something like that.
Yeah, Lake Town, I believe it is now. But they had one, and it was so good, and it was just like I was expecting like a heavy kind of like a heavier kind of beer, kind of like a more of a Guinness, but it was so smooth and so tasty. Like it was amazing. It's one of the best stouts I've ever had. But how does this one taste for you?
It's pretty nice, but it's just a stout. Like there's nothing summery about it. There's nothing tropical about it. But it's got a little bit of that, kind of chocolatey feel to it that a lot of them have. It's nice, man. I got no complaints about it. But my suspicions about this just being pull the winter stout label off and pluck the summer label on, I don't know. They still remain at this point.
Might have to have a word with the manager next time you go there.
Could be, man. Could be.
Throw down.
Right. Look, we got a few different places we could start, but why don't we just in kind of a general sense, I'm curious where you're at with hockey at this point. There was a lot of talk going into that Final Four. It was Vegas and Dallas. It was Florida and Carolina. It's those southern markets that some Canadian fans were maybe a little smugly, maybe a little arrogantly, I don't know, but legitimately having a hard time getting up for. And I felt that quite a bit. Maybe I'm one of those smug ones. There was something about this matchup, or those two matchups, that didn't really speak to me. And I didn't watch a whole lot of the conference finals. When there was, overtime going on, I would jump in. If I was sitting around not doing much else, maybe I'd put it on. But it didn't really grab me. And now we've arrived at a Florida-Vegas final, and no doubt they'll do their best to, put together some storylines here. And I'm sure it'll be a good series. But what's your excitement level on it? Are you planning to watch much of this final? Does it have your attention?
Oh yeah, for sure. But I'm I'm the easy target in terms of an audience that's going to watch. I love the Stanley Cup Final, and yeah, I wasn't. The only thing I had a problem with, other than the Leafs not making the third round, we wont talk about that just yet, though. I really wanted Seattle to get in. Nothing against Dallas, because I think that they're a team that needs this kind of exposure. They have so many great players, but there's just not a lot of sexiness or hype around their squad. But talented, top to bottom, such a great, well-rounded squad. Love them. So I kind of wanted to see Seattle get in, mainly because I think that there would have been so many more cooler storylines, right? Especially in the West, right? Two newer franchises getting to the conference final, only a couple of years into the league, especially Seattle in their second season. We saw Vegas do it in their first season, but the jersey matchups are cool. Well, but I don't really care about that, because I still think Vegas has nicer jerseys than Seattle's. But I also think it's you could have built a rivalry.
Just to stop you for a second, because you were there the first time this happened, man. I did not need the Panthers getting by the Leafs, because that pigeon Creech, I was worried was going to be showing up in the studio with that Panthers jersey like he did. I don't know. That was like a year ago.
For a while.
Yeah, honestly, man, I couldn't have him in studio there during that series or in the immediate aftermath. But you're right. The jersey battle is not too bad here, but it does look like an interesting enough series in terms of the actual on ice product, right?
Yeah, no, it does. That was the only thing I wanted, though, for my Final Four, is to see Seattle get in over Dallas. So that way Vegas and Seattle, like I said, there could have been a good rivalry there, right? You two West Coast teams, two newer teams, and you're always worried about, all right, well, who are going to be the rivals? You kind of live off that, right? Your fan bases. And I was like, that would have been a perfect opportunity.
Yeah.
Dallas.
Cousins, yeah.
Yeah, exactly, man. It would have been just cool. It's an extra kind of storyline you could have had. I just didn't find there was a lot of there. There's nothing there between Vegas, Dallas, right? That was oh man, I need to watch the series. Other than the fact that it's the Western Conference Finals. So I wanted Vegas and Florida to get in. I was kind of, those are the teams I thought would make the better Cup Finals in general. I love Vegas' squad from top to bottom. I've had a little crush on them for the last I don't know, couple seasons here now. But since Bruce Cassidy got there, and has really that, I feel like that team was built for him.
So
and
funny.
His style.
Bruins fire him. He goes to the Cup Final there in the first round. That's probably not the way they envisioned that going.
And right after that, they had a record-breaking year too, right? The Bruins, it's just crazy how this season worked. But I just, Mark Stone is awesome. I love Shea Theodore. I love Alex Pietrangelo. I love the depth that this team has from top to bottom. So I guess if you want to say it, I kind of jumped on the Vegas bandwagon once the Leafs were eliminated in that sense of it. When it came to Carolina, Florida, I don't know about you if you had a preference in general. Obviously, you didn't want to see Florida because they beat the Leafs.
Florida.
No, but I also was I have no appetite for Carolina being there either.
Right.
So I was kind of I liked the way that Florida, as much as I'm sour that the Leafs didn't beat them, this is a team that's just been on a roll. They've lost 2 games. Yep. One game since April 23rd. This is a team we're entering June by the time the puck drops, and they've lost 1 game against the Leafs since April 23rd. Against the Bruins.
Yeah.
It's ridiculous. So this team is just on a heater right now. And as much, I love the Kachucks. I think that they're great, and they're so good for the game of hockey. And people are going on about Bobrovsky, and he did show up and save them. But man, the way he performed against the Hurricanes, this guy is right there with the Conn Smythe. I'd give it to him personally, because I think that he was great as well in round 1. And sure, Bob got in there, but he didn't even start the series. So I'm looking at Matt Tkachuk since the beginning of the playoffs to now, and he's been the most consistent assistant and best player. And Bobrovsky, yeah, he's been so good too. And it's annoying as hell because it feels like the guy was terrible and he just wanted to appear against the Leafs like he's amazing again. And it drove me crazy for that sense. But I was on the side of I wanted to see Florida. I like a lot of their players, but I just think that they play a really fun game to watch. And I think that very much suits up against Vegas. So I'm really happy with the Stanley Cup Final.
I'm with you on Bobrovsky. To me, we'll see what happens in the final, but there is no debate for me that Bobrovsky is the clubhouse leader right now for the Conn Smythe, because the Panthers keep winning like all of these games, like 7 out of the last 8 wins or whatever it's been, have all been by 1 goal. And I understand, Matthew Tkachuk putting in 3 overtime winners and how crazy clutch that is, but they're not even in position for him to do that unless Bobrovsky's doing what he's doing, right? So to me, he is the guy going into this final who has, the lead on that. I'm curious what your stance is. You said you kind of adopted Vegas this year as the team that you jump on the bandwagon for. If you asked me to pick who I'm cheering for, it would probably be Vegas, but it's a fairly lukewarm endorsement, right? Like, I'm not super excited about it. But the one guy that I do find myself a little surprised, even to me, that I'm cheering for is Jack Eichel a little bit, because in Buffalo, we all made the jokes, right? He's the coach and the GM, and he's Connor's number 2 and all these sorts of things. And he sort of built himself a bit of a bad rap. And then what he went through there with his medical issues and with his neck and his back and not being allowed to choose his own, medical treatment, which was still totally fucked up. To see him get to Vegas, get a second chance, and show that he is still, when given the opportunity, like an elite center in this league. And it took him some time, right? It took him some time to get going again. He'd been through a lot. He'd been off for quite a while. But I have enjoyed watching Jack Eichel kind of reassert himself as a top player in the league. And I'm surprised, like I said, I surprised even myself with that. I was sort of enjoying Jack Eichel being a punching bag in Buffalo there for a long time. I never really thought I'd see myself in a position where I was sort of half rooting for him and happy to see him get his game going again. Where are you at on Jack Eichel in these playoffs?
Yeah, love him. I think he's just been a different player than I've seen before. I'm with you. I was never the biggest fan of him. I just kind of, I always thought he was a solid player, but I just, in terms of the way he played, it's kind of always seems like he had an attitude. 100%. Felt like when he was in Buffalo, he was always blaming everybody else. I gained a lot of respect for him when he stood up for himself and said that he wanted to, do this surgery on his own. And I thought that Vegas was a great spot for him because he has some good leadership around him. Yes. Guys like Pietrangelo, guys like Mark Stone, Marchessault's been there for a couple years now, right? And he's kind of been the face since almost the start. But I thought that was a good fit for him, and I've loved him for this entire playoff. Like he's been awesome, and 18 points. He's got the most on Vegas right now, right beside Marchessault. But those two have some great chemistry. I just feel like you notice him out there every shift. He has the puck. He just seems like a different player. That's kind of maybe even just coming into his own. Yeah. But I think he's been great. And if you're looking for a Conn Smythe favorite on that side, there's no chance it's anybody other than him.
Yeah, no, I agree with you there. probably not going to be their goalie. Aiden Hill plopped in there kind of out of nowhere.
The trio of guys that they rotate.
Honestly, it's good for them. He's doing fine, but I don't think anybody would have predicted that Aiden Hill would be the starting goaltender this year for a Stanley Cup finalist. But here we are.
Yeah, that back end of Vegas is, like I said, the decor. Like all 6 guys are just. Like I have no problems with any of them. Like Martinez and Pietrangelo, like they're such a solid 1-2. But I really like the way
Theodore is so good, right? Like so underrated.
Oh, he's so underrated. He's so good. But I also really like Braden McNabb a lot. Yeah. I love the way he plays the game, and I feel like that's such a great pair. And then like Zach Whitecloud, like he's really surprised me all playoffs. And already like Nick Hague is very whatever, but it's just like he doesn't seem like a slouch either out there, and he's had a pretty decent playoff. So like I've liked a lot of that. Like I said, they're the decor for a while, but just seeing them play in the playoffs, it's like it doesn't matter. Like you said, I wouldn't have ever thought Aiden Hill was going to be the starting goaltender, but it's like, you know what, here we go. It's like, and half the time it's not even
John Quick sitting on the bench, right? Like they traded for that guy at the deadline. He's got 2 cups, and they're rolling ride or die with Aiden Hill.
And it's crazy.
world.
But and like I said, that back end is, I feel like, very much responsible for it too. Aiden Hill's been very like hit and miss. I think he was riding a bit of a cloud nine at the beginning of the series against Dallas, and I think that he's kind of got it together a little bit. But I'm curious to see how this team performs again in their second round of the Stanley Cup Final.
Yeah, no, it's true. There was other hockey news as we sit here on Wednesday. The Toronto Maple Leafs named the guy that basically everyone thought they were going to name since they decided they weren't bringing Kyle Dubas back. It's been almost 2 weeks since that announcement was made that Dubas wouldn't be back. And those are valuable days as the Leafs have a lot of work to do. But Brad Treliving had already been dismissed by the Calgary Flames. Or there's some cloudiness around what that looked like.
Walked away.
It sounds like fired. Right. Yeah, they had chosen Daryl Sutter over him, and he kind of went, "Well, then I'm out of here." And then they ended up firing Daryl Sutter anyway. So a bit of a mess there. But it sort of feels like it took them almost 2 weeks to do what we always knew they were going to do. I don't know how many other people they spoke to. For whatever reason, there was a lot of talk that Doug Armstrong in St. Louis would be a candidate, despite the fact that he had just signed an extension. Andy Strickland he covers the Blues. He reported that they never asked the Blues for permission to speak to Doug Armstrong, so that was clearly a media invention. But we've landed on Brad Treliving, and I don't know. For people who don't know, his father is Jim Treliving of Dragon's Den and owns the Boston Pizza chain. And that is almost
the Ottawa Senators.
Yeah. And that is almost, to me, the perfect analogy to getting Brad Treliving to be your GM in Toronto. When you are sitting there with your buddies talking about where you're going to go tonight, what you're going to have for dinner, and you sort of settle on Boston Pizza. Like, it'll be fine. No one's really excited about it, but it'll be okay, and you'll have a couple beers and the food will be fine. But no one's like over the moon, like, we have to go to Boston Pizza. And that's sort of where I'm at with Brad Treliving. I think he's okay. He'll do fine, but there's nothing exciting about this in my mind. I don't know what your reaction was today. I'm curious to find out, was this sort of where you expected to, that this was always going to land? Were you surprised? What was your reaction when it was made official, man?
Yeah, I mean, I'll even go back a couple weeks. I was a little surprised that they kind of let Dubas go.
Yeah.
In this sense. I just thought that he had done enough to save his job this kind of season, especially by going out and making some acquisitions that really helped the team, especially in the playoffs. Ryan O'Reilly, Luke Shen especially, Noel Acciari. I really liked what he brought to the game.
As we get ready for the Stanley Cup Final, Noel Acciari is still the hit leader in the Stanley Cup playoffs, and he hasn't played in 2 weeks. So
that's awesome.
Yeah.
But he was a different element. But so I thought, we got to a point where this year it looked like, and maybe he didn't want to be back as much as they wanted him back, but maybe Shanny was also like, you know what, we've given you your chance. Like, we kind of want to move on into a different lane. And I get it. It's cool. So I was kind of like, all right, well, who's out there that really intrigues me? And I was like, okay.
Yeah.
All right. And I heard the Doug Armstrong stuff too, but never really bought it. Like you said, I wasn't feeling that because of the contract extension, but also that St. Louis is very much in an interesting position right now anyways. So when I was like, all right, Treliving,
and he's king shit there, right? Like, he's running the show. Yeah. Does he want to come here and answer to Shanny? Probably not, right?
No, I'm sure there's a lot of that too. And I think the factor would have been someone here try to keep Austin Matthews in Toronto, basically. You know what I mean? This is kind of your last year. And, for me, I'm thinking, I don't really know who to believe and what to expect right now. You had Austin Matthews saying he wants an extension. We also had Kyle Dubas that said he was Toronto or bust. And now it sounds like he's kind of waiting on the Ottawa Senator sale to maybe take a job here. I understand why he didn't want the job in Pittsburgh, if that he did turn that down, which has been reported by a couple of insiders. So I don't know why.
Yeah, to me, the Dubas thing was, he's not using this as leverage. You're not going to see me pop up somewhere else. I'm trying to get a deal done with Toronto, or I'm not going to do anything. Once Toronto says to him, we don't want you back, and he had apparently decided he was ready to work, I think that's sort of off the table. I won't be surprised if he pops up in Ottawa or Pittsburgh or wherever the next job might be. Like I sort of think that's off the table personally.
Yeah, I mean, like the reports are that he turned down the Pittsburgh job, and I believe it. I don't know. That's another team that's in a spot where you have a lot of aging superstars but your core is kind of falling apart, and you don't have a lot going on.
So have no prospects. That's a rough job.
Yeah, so I can see him not wanting to step into that. So when Treliving got in, and I was like, you know what? All right, like, is that the best we can do? But it's also like, I looked him up, and like a lot of the stuff he's did in Calgary, I have no issues with. I kind of think he did some good stuff there and helped rebuild that spot. I wasn't a fan of the Matt Tkachuk trade, so but that I don't believe was something that was avoidable. It was unavoidable because he wanted out. It sounded like.
He sort of said, I'm not signing, so trade me or whatever. And at the time, I don't know where you stood on that. Given that Treliving was backed into a corner there, I thought at the time, that was a good trade, that he got Huberdeau and Mackenzie Weegar for Matt Tkachuk. I thought, wow, like that's really impressive. And then they both went out and had fairly uninspiring seasons that leave me wondering if it was quite as good of a deal as I thought it was at the time.
Yeah, so I feel you. So I was kind of surprised that Dubas was gone. I felt like this was either Sheldon Keefe or you kind of got to make a trade, and maybe that's how the conversations went. I believe maybe there was some times where Kyle Dubas was too attached to this core. Like if you think back to it, we can just maybe get in more on this too, just quickly up if you don't mind. Sure. But like, what do you think is the legacy of Kyle Dubas through his time in Toronto? Like, I don't have a lot to give you personally. And I don't know if you have any differing opinions, but the biggest thing is that he just didn't get it done when it mattered. And you had four guys that are being paid like over $40 million in Tavares and Matthews and Marner and Nylander, the contracts he gave out. And it's like, he just never got the job done. So it's like, all right, well, what's his legacy in Toronto? So Treliving, coming to Toronto was like, okay. And I don't know about you, like I said, if you have a different view on Kyle Dubas, but I said it, I don't know, a year ago, I thought they should trade Marner and all this stuff. But when you think of Kyle Dubas' time in Toronto, where do you kind of sit in his legacy? Is there anything that like very positive kind of stands out to you?
The word I guess I would use, and I've used once or twice talking about this on the show, is stability. I really like what he built as an organization. I really like that we stopped hearing about the crazy ass nonsense that we used to hear as Leaf fans coming out of the board or coming out of, there was less crazy shit. And it was a good team. It was a competitive team through the regular season. And I have always sort of subscribed to the theory, and it was based on watching St. Louis, it was based on watching Washington, that you just stay good for as long as you can, and one of these times you hope for a little good luck, right? And so I thought he had set them up pretty well for that, but I am with you in the fact that I don't think, and I've said this a few times on here, but I don't think it was crazy if they had have fired him, right? They came out and said, you didn't get by again. It is a winning business, and you can have all the 111, 109, 115 point seasons you want. In North American sports, we value playoff success, and he didn't get that done. So I don't think it's crazy that they didn't, I wouldn't have thought it was crazy if they just said, you're gone. What I think is crazy is the road we took, which was we've decided we want him back. Brendan Shanahan, even in his own press conference, is going, really liked the summer he had, really liked the season we had, really liked the trade deadline he had, and I tried multiple times to give him a contract. And then I watched his press conference and I went, fuck that, and fired him. Like, that is a weird way to behave, right? So as for his legacy, to me, the word is stability and being less, like I said, less hilariously inept. I think Brad Treliving will be stable. Like, I don't think he's going to be one of these crazy, like Brian Burke used to come out and just start fires in the media because it would take the pressure off his guys, right? And it'll make him the story again. We stopped seeing that type of nonsense, and I valued that. So I'm not saying he's irreplaceable. I'm not saying he's the best GM ever, but I do think it's concerning that you let this guy learn on the job for 5 years as a young first-time GM, and just as he was figuring it out and getting experienced and getting better and better at this, now's the time you decided to kick him down the road. That's sort of where I'm at with it.
Yeah, and so where my point is on that too is, like, you think about it, and the things I do remember him saying is that he promised William Nylander he wouldn't trade him. And you think about, all right, well, William Nylander was the guy that's like, you know what, he actually has the best contract for, I guess, what he puts out in terms of points. Like, you know what I mean? And so I'm wondering if he was too attached to this
too loyal
core
to this
four.
group. I think that's possible, man. I think that's reasonable.
Yeah, I'm wondering if Shanny said, all right, I need your vision on what's going to happen in the next little while here. Are you going to trade one of these guys? What's going to happen? Because, you know, Tavares, as much as he showed up in round one, he was non-existent, just like Austin Matthews and Mitch Marner in round two.
Yep.
But you get to these, you know, you have to make a big move, and maybe he didn't believe that needed to be done. Maybe he wanted to stay status quo with that core four.
Maybe.
And I know he said in his post-press conference that, you know, nothing was off the table, but I'm wondering if that's kind of where he was, because you could tell maybe he had a personal little bit of an attachment, like that was his core four, and he didn't want to.
But maybe it's Shanny who has that, because there was a report Chris Johnston put out that Shanahan on the day that he called the big four guys, five guys, whatever the leaders on the team to say we're firing Dubas, he sort of told them it's my vision to bring you all back. So maybe it's the opposite. Maybe Dubas said we got to make a change, and Shanny said no. Like we're guessing a little bit.
I'm not sure, and that's the thing. I don't really know what Shanahan meant by that, because I believe he also understood too, because he was the year before was like, we need a killer instinct, right? I feel like he should realize, and that's where I'm not sure if I'm buying what he's saying there, and maybe he's taking some of that cloud away. Yeah, I don't know, because when I heard that, I was very confused, because, you know, for a guy that's won enough Stanley Cups and been around the league long enough and has seen this team in the core four, I feel like you got to be pretty ignorant to ignore that you can't do nothing about it. I feel like you don't have to absolutely go out of your way to just get rid of them for nothing. I feel like all of them have value other than John Tavares. I'm not really sure what you would get for him in a return. I feel like you'd have to give up a draft pick to move that kind of a contract, because as much as I like the guy, I just feel like he's the kind of guy that's like, all right, man, like, it's time for you to step up now, and that contract isn't going to look good in the next couple of years. So I look at that. The Matthews thing is obviously number one. What are you going to do with him? Are you going to find an extension for him? What's happening there? Mitch Marner, like, there's a lot that Treliving has to come into right now, and I was just curious maybe if there was something going on there in terms of vision, and if Brendan Shanahan really believes in that. I don't know, man. I personally just don't think that this core four is going to be able to get it done, and I just feel like the guys lacking killer instinct are the guys that need to have the killer instinct, and I just feel like we've seen enough times now. Jonathan Tavares absolutely doesn't have it, and Mitch Marner absolutely doesn't have it either.
Well, let's talk a little bit about that as we come back around to Brad Treliving and looking forward to what he's coming into. That John Tavares contract that Kyle Dubas gave him, for people who didn't like it, said that it was too long. It was taking John Tavares into an older age bracket or whatever. That contract expires when John Tavares is 34. In the last 18 months, Brad Treliving has signed, and I guess it's more like the last 24 months, maybe a little bit longer, but Brad Treliving has signed Nazem Kadri, Jacob Markstrom, Mackenzie Weegar, and Jonathan Huberdeau. Yeah. All to huge contracts that take them well into their age 36 season, and in some cases 37. So I'm not sure the new guy is an upgrade in that sense either, right? If we're worried about the types of contracts he gives out into a type of age group he gives out, that's concerning, right? So it just as we compare and contrast with Kyle Dubas, like I said, the Tavares deal ends at 34. So, you know, these are worthwhile things to contribute. He has had a decent, not fantastic, but decent draft record. You could say the same about Kyle Dubas, right? The Leafs will wait and see how some of his drafts pan out. The early returns aren't fantastic. He gets blamed for a lot of the ones a little earlier, which were Mark Hunter drafts, and those were also abysmal. What do you think of this guy, of Brad Treliving coming in here? And is it an upgrade? Is it a downgrade? Is it just kind of a step to the side? You mentioned Kyle Dubas not getting it done in the playoffs, which is a completely fair criticism. He has one series win in 5 years as GM. Brad Treliving has 2 series wins in 7 years as GM. So it's really not a huge upgrade there either in terms of building teams with killer instinct. I'm curious what you think of this guy in comparison to Kyle Dubas. Better, worse, the same?
Yeah, it's tough. I'm in the kind of same, and I want to see. Like I have nothing against them because I feel like the Kyle Dubas thing had kind of worn off a bit. Like I told you,
Yep.
and just I think there was a change that needed to be made. I didn't think it would be him out of all of the all of that. So when I look at Treliving, I'm like, all right, let's see. Like he's got his work cut out for him with more than enough free agents to bring back. Like I said, I want to see what he does. I don't want to see 5-year contracts to Nola Chari because he's a free agent. Absolutely, I won't like that. But when he brought in Nazem Kadri, I was okay with that contract, mainly because I liked what he did there, because I thought his vision was, you know what, this guy's coming off a Stanley Cup win. Let's bring him in and see what we could do with him.
And that fan base was reeling, right? They had lost Goudreau. They were about to lose Tkachuk. We got to do something. So I'm not necessarily saying he was crazy to do it. I'm just saying as we compare the ages and the contracts, he's not, he's not that different from Kyle in being willing to go like that.
No, and that's the thing, right? Your GMs in there, especially in those spots, you kind of get put against the wall and you got to try and figure out what you're going to do. And I believe his thought was, you know what, I think Nazem Kadri would pair up. Like, I didn't see the way I didn't think the Calgary Flames would miss the playoffs
Me
this year.
neither.
Did you? No, and I thought he set up that team pretty decently.
Yeah.
I thought guys had a down year. So when I look at what he could do and what he's done, I like a lot of his drafts. I think that's a big thing. It seems like he's not afraid to take safe picks, where sometimes I thought that what bothered me with Kyle Dubas was he would lean more towards the skill than the size, right? And someone that could be a grittier guy, he'd take a shot on maybe a dark horse, smaller guy that put up a lot of points, but might grow into it. We're seeing a lot of this. Like I thought Matthew Nyes is one of his best picks,
sure,
and in general, and that over the last couple of years, right?
Yeah. Whereas your Nick Robertsons and Semyon Daraguchentsevs and what are smaller, they're getting beat around a bit. They're having a hard time getting set, right?
And that's the thing, right? And sometimes you hit on these guys, but sometimes you miss. And it's like you look a lot of what Calgary's done, and I think that I like a lot of what he did. I'm curious to see now what he does with this roster construction. If he does try to get rid of one of the big fours, or what, he just kind of comes in and nickels and dimes and kind of puts us through. And his big focus right now, I believe, is going to be Austin Matthews. How is it not?
Has to be.
But other than that, William Nylander's another one too, where it's like, well, what do we view on him? Because he's only got a year left too, and he's getting paid pretty good. So he's a guy I'm looking forward to seeing a little bit more of, as a Leaf. I don't think he's ever underplayed for them. I think that he takes a lot of the blame. I do believe that I don't love the way he plays the game, because I do feel like he's more of a perimeter player. Feels like a lot of the time against Florida, he was afraid to get to the middle of that ice and was always, had the puck in the neutral zone, but then would take it wide once he got into the zone. So I'm curious to see if he's a guy that maybe gets traded out this year. But on the back end, it's a bit of a mess, man. And we saw that against, in the playoffs. It's like, Justin Hall, not, very much, obviously, he's in a UFA, but he was a Dubas guy, right? And that was the thing where I think he won with the Marley, so he's always had his back. I didn't like him in the playoffs. I didn't like a lot of the 11-7 decisions. And I feel like there's some guys on this decor that are good, but it's like, all right, man, like Jake McCabe, he's a guy I'm happy that they have for a couple of years here. Luke Shen, I'd absolutely love to see him back for another year. I think he brought a lot there. Gustafsson is another interesting name. There's a couple of free agents that I'm like, all right, are you going to target one? Because I think they're top four.
Looked his age hard too, right?
I know. I really don't.
I love that guy, but you might be at the end of that rope, right?
He was the one guy other than Hall that I thought was struggled a lot against the Panthers, and I would have liked him out of the lineup. But I understood why you couldn't kind of take him out, right, as a veteran guy. I was never a huge fan of that trade. I thought that was a kind of a waste of a trade. Nothing against Giordano. I've always said he's a great guy.
I thought he was pretty good the previous year against Tampa. I just thought this year maybe when they had all those injuries on D early in the season and middle of the season, he stepped up and actually played really well still. But I thought maybe that ran him out of gas a bit, right? And he was starting to show his age by the end. I do wonder if he'll be back, right? If maybe it's time to retire. I thought the trade, by and large, was okay because he was pretty good for us last year and for the first half of this year. But, Father Time, undefeated, right? He comes for everybody at some point.
Yeah, my only problem with the trade at the time was it kind of felt like it was a desperation. They really wanted a veteran defenseman to add, and why I didn't really love it is it's like, all right, well, who's the best available out there that we could probably get without having to give up something like big time? And it's like, oh, you know what, let's go for Gio. And it's like I wanted a guy that, I would have loved a Luke Shen in that spot. A guy that's been to the Cup Final, added a bit of nastiness, gave you a different element on your back end, and helped you out a lot more in that sense. And I just found like Giordano was like, all right, he's basically the exact same kind of defenseman that this team already deploys. He doesn't have any real experience because he never won a cup, but he's been to the playoffs a good couple bit. He's 39 years old. He's old. He's been around for a bit. But I was like, I just wanted that extra guy. I felt like they kind of just went and grabbed a veteran guy rather than a veteran guy that's been there, done that, and could help a lot of this young core. I wasn't a fan of the Sandin trade because I feel like he would have been a great guy to add to your top four heading into this year. I think Timothy Liljegren stood out a bit against the Panthers. I thought he was one of their better, more consistent defensemen, other than Luke Schenn, who I think was their best defenseman through the playoffs. So, like I said, I look at Treliving and I'm like,
give
all right,
Morgan
what's he
Riley a little love
here?
After a terrible season. Riley was fantastic for them.
Sorry, yes, sorry, I didn't mean to disclude him there. I wasn't saying that in that sense. He had a great round in the first round. Obviously, in the second round, it cooled off a bit,
bit. Yeah,
was very much still really good.
He was one of those guys
I just
kept
really
fighting,
liked
right when we were criticizing the core about not showing up for game 3. Morgan Riley showed up for every game and did his absolute best. So I think he maybe got.
It goes back to a couple.
Go ahead. Sorry.
I go back to a couple years ago, and I really wish he would have been the captain. I never
convinced.
had anything against.
You might still see that.
Yeah, and I thought that he showed that leadership. A guy that's been through so much with this organization in his career too, from even before he was drafted, breaking his leg in his draft year. I thought, you know what, all right, like who's going to step up in these moments? And when he scored those overtime goals, in the first, and I think he had the second round one as well. But he just looked so good. Yeah. And I was like, man, this guy like just stepped up and added an extra gear. And what made me so happy was that he didn't have a great regular season.
No.
So heading into the playoffs, I'm like, man, like, all right, we need him to be a dog. And it's like, oh man, this guy's a dog.
He was
he's out there.
Yeah.
He was having a great first round against Tampa. I loved it. Second round, he was still very strong. I had nothing against the second round, but I just noticed Luke Schenn almost every time he was out there, like he was doing something very good. And there's a couple moments he'd take a bad penalty or whatever it was, but I just thought I noticed him out there every time, and he just made some good, smart plays. But he was also that guy that added the different element in the physicality factor and the I'm not backing down factor, and the guy that was like always hard to play against, boxing out in front of his net. I thought he did good, and I thought the one thing that stood out to me was his skating. I just thought he looked like a great, better skater.
Yep.
Just looked like he picked up an extra step once the playoffs came around. So I was really happy to see that for Luke Schenn. So I would love to see him back. But when I look at this back end, it's like you got a bunch of okay maybes. Like TJ Brody played a lot in the playoffs. I'm curious to see what happens here. I'm very curious to see what Treliving does. It's like as much as like you said, it's kind of a step to the side. There's not much there. I wasn't excited either. We were kind of just like, yeah, all right, Treliving. Let's see what he can do.
Boston pizza.
It is like dinner. I am kind of just like that right now. It's like, all right, man, welcome to this team. You have a draft in like literally 3 weeks here, 4 weeks, and the end of June here. So it's like time to scramble. And also on the same time, you've got like 12 UFAs you got to figure out, and you got to figure out a new contract for Austin Matthews, and you got to figure out if you're going to split up the big four. So that list is big for a guy that's coming in right now, and I'm just I'm excited to see a new face, like that new pair of eyes on this roster and what they do. And I'm also just excited and hope it goes well. I think change is always good. I just hope this isn't a bad change.
Yeah, it's an interesting point you make there on sometimes a fresh set of eyes isn't the worst thing in the world, right? I'm not particularly pumped that Brad Treliving is here. I'm not horribly bummed that he's here, but it sort of seems like a step to the side. But sometimes a step to the side brings you a different look, a different feel, a slightly different, well, what if we just tried this? And that might work out. The one thing I do want to ask you, though, before we move off this and talk a little CFL, is I sort of feel like there's a chance now that they have a new guy in charge that I don't think most of us predicted was going to be the case. Like, I came out of those playoffs thinking, okay, Keefe's probably gone and maybe one of the big four is gone, but Kyle Dubas is probably back. And now Kyle Dubas is gone, and it sort of feels to me more likely today than it was yesterday that Keefe might be back and that all four of the big four might be back. Because how many GMs have we seen come in over the years and go, I want to take a look. I want to see what we have here, right? I don't want to make it. I don't know the organization quite as well. Sheldon Keefe's record is good. Some of that's because he had the benefit of his first job being behind a team that was already built to be successful, but he's done some good things. I didn't love most of his work in the playoffs, to be honest with you. I thought he was out-coached twice, and one of those times was by Paul Maurice, which, just cannot happen. And you have this big four that Brad Treliving is going to come in and take a look at and say, man, these are four really talented players. And I don't know how excited I am without knowing all the dynamics, who gets along with who, right? Like, what are the cliques? Who was only here because they were Kyle's boy? Like, these sorts of things. I think it's more likely today than it was yesterday or 2 weeks ago that Keefe and the Big Four are all back with this new guy coming in and saying it's the stuff around them that we need to address and not them. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I really, for my big thing here, Matt, is just, I want to know, it's tough. I want to know why Keefe was, if he does have his job, why he was picked over Kyle Dubas. Because personally, I don't understand it. Like you, I'm very disappointed in seeing that every year he gets the playoffs and he's always been outcoached. Yeah. I don't like the fact that he was going so stubbornly with the 11-7. I don't like that. I never did. I get it. Gives your star players more ice time, but it got to a point where you're never really giving the back end a good enough time to gel and vibe when you're taking guys out of the lineup and putting them back in. I think he has a good record, and I think that the tie to Kyle Dubas was, I just thought he would be gone, especially when you see his assistant get hired as the head coach at another place. I'm like, okay, interesting here. And I didn't even expect him to, any of these assistants to get hired somewhere else. So I was interested in that. I don't think that this team would be in a good spot if it's Sheldon Keefe and the Big Four coming back. Personally, I don't like that. I just feel like you're constantly, you're kind of doing the same thing.
I'm not saying it's right. I just think it's more likely than it was before. Kyle, if he had stayed, was going to be forced to do something. We let you stay. Yeah. You better change something. And now the change was him. And maybe the new guy has a boring summer of just filling in more pieces around them again. I'm not saying for sure, but I think that's on the table now. Then maybe it wasn't before.
It probably is. I want to believe it's not. I'm kind of in this denial of wanting to be in a positive spot. I don't know. I don't want to believe it more than I want to than I believe it.
Yeah.
So I'm
with you.
Yeah, it's kind of tough. Like I said, I really personally think that Sheldon Keefe should be gone. I don't know if he's absolutely not going to be, but I don't know, man. I feel like there's something there that just, you know what, let's just have a fresh, clean slate. And that's where, like I said, I am curious to see what is Treliving's just number one priority. Is it literally, is he attacking Austin Matthews right now for an extension? And he's like, I'll figure out everything else later. You guys get the draft under control. Let me handle Austin.
I hope so, because he's also the guy who just had walked Johnny Gaudreau to free agency, watched him leave, and Matt Tkachuk then turn around and go, well, then fuck that, I'm out of here too. So that's alarming if you're a Leaf fan. He'd better be on the phone every day right now trying to get Austin Matthews to and I do believe, to be honest with you, that Austin Matthews wants to stay. So it's just going to be a question of the numbers, and we'll see what that looks like. I know you have, as we sit here now, only a couple weeks from the beginning of the CFL season. You've been doing the media work there. You've been sniffing around at training camp. You covered the last preseason game they played there last Friday. Look, we've seen some injuries already, but I'm curious what your sense of the vibes around the team are. How much better do you think the Red Blacks are this year than they were last year? And, that we're suddenly hearing a lot of talk that maybe Jeremiah Masoli, who had that horrible injury last year, isn't going to be ready for game one, which I think most of us just assumed was a given that he would be back for. What are you seeing around camp, man? How's it looked when you've been there?
Yeah, it's been honestly a lot more positive, and there's some certain positions that I feel like the depth has been a lot more obvious, especially number one being receiver, DB as well. but I've liked a lot of what I've seen so far. Jeremiah Masoli, I don't believe is going to be ready to go week one, just from everything I've seen and just my vibes on it. And I feel like Nick Arbuckle playing into the third quarter last week saw that. I know you had to mix in a couple of receivers that you're maybe trying to look at with the ones to give them a better chance. But when I looked at it, I'm like, okay, like let's see what's going on here. I have no issues with this at all. I kind of feel like the vibes are still good. I feel like Nick Arbuckle is going to be good to, week one. Hopefully, week two, they have the early bye, so it's good. Yeah. But I want to see Masoli in this offense almost right away. But in terms of receiver, like this is a really deep room where we're starting to see a lot of guys kind of come into their own, but we're starting to see the young guys as well push some of these veterans for spots, and I'm loving it. And being down on the sidelines, I'm the sideline reporter for TSN 1200 games. I get to see a lot of the vibes. I get to see a lot of the people. I get to kind of feel the energy on the sideline. It was different last game. Maybe it was because there was 84 guys down there and it was a gong show. It's always busy and crazy in the preseason, but a lot of the energy I noticed was guys like Savon Scarver, the receiver. He did a bit of kick returning as well. He was on the practice squad last year. I interviewed him after the game, but he's a guy that just showed up and he's battling for a spot. And a guy like Quan Bray, he's been a veteran kind of in this league. He's been around for a couple of years with Montreal, a big, very productive receiver in his career. He's on the outside kind of looking in right now, I feel like. And it's because a guy like Savon Scarver showed up and he's like, you know what, I'm going to do this. And his ability to be electric in the kick return game, but also showing that he's a big receiver. He came up with a huge grab in the first quarter of the game, kind of a statement grab on second down to get the first down with a DB all over him. He made the grab. And I'm like, all right, like this guy is pretty serious. And he went on to have a pretty good game. So Quan Bray is interesting. A guy like Siosi Mariner, or another receiver who he played a little bit late last year, but I know the organization is really high on him. There's a lot of hype. He had a huge game in his first game as a Red Black, and he's a guy that was it looked like injured for most of training camp. Didn't even suit up last week, so he's in the lineup for tomorrow night and against Guelph. And it's like he's the number 2 receiver listed on the depth chart. So the receiving game is going to be very And Braylon Addison's a guy too that they just brought in from Hamilton. Yeah. He's not even going to be ready till around July. I spoke with him at the game the other night. He says he's trying to get back. He's already rehabbing. He's doing a lot. He's enjoying Ottawa. And it's like, all right, these guys already on top of guys like Devontae Dedmon as a returner, but I believe he's going to get a lot more looks. But Jalen Acklin, already really good out there. Yeah. Nate Bahar, already really good out there. So they have a very good core, but depth at receiver has been very evident so far at camp. And I guess I'll take a breath here and let you ask me another question or bring up another point or even just touch on here because the offensive line is another one I can go into as well.
Well, by all means, because that was one of the big, points of emphasis through the offseason and again at the draft. The offensive line was a place that most of us had taken a look and said, that's a major improvement. And when you have a quarterback like Jeremiah Masoli coming off the injury that he did on the dirty type of play that he suffered that injury on, that's got to be big, not just for him physically, but for for peace of mind to know I'm standing in behind an offensive line that is going to have my back, that is going to take care of me, is going to be very capable. I think that could be huge for this team, man. What have you seen out of the offensive line at this point?
Yeah, it's been awesome. Like they are big. That's one thing for sure.
Yeah.
Dino Boyd is playing at left tackle. They went out and brought in Dejar Hitley, who's supposed to be their left guard, Hogan Saydon at center, and Jacob Ruby, the 3 Canadians in the middle. Their interior line is awesome. And right now, Zach Pelios is playing the right tackle, and another Canadian in that spot. I think he is going to win that job. He's getting pushed by a couple other guys in Justice Powers and centers out there, but I do believe that it is a very good offensive line. And Hunter Stewart, who played every game pretty much last year at that offensive line, he's fighting for a spot at center as a Canadian in their game against Toronto Guelph. Mm-hmm. He's going to be like, he's a guy fighting for a spot. And it's like, you think about that. He was a starting guy on that offensive line every game last year, basically. Yep. And now he is a guy fighting for a spot.
Sign of the turnover, right? The upgrades they're hoping to make. It's life or death to make that spot now.
Yeah, and so it's going to be interesting to see what happens there. But I do believe the depth on the offensive line, like you're going to see a couple of guys playing left tackle. I brought up Powers; he's going to be playing left tackle. Sanders is going to be playing left guard as well.
Have you seen much of the big boy there, Dante Bull? I understand he's a first-round pick this year. They wouldn't be looking for him to make much of an impact. But he's been around.
Expected to come in very soon. I have seen him walking around. He's a monster.
That is
Dante
a big,
Bull
scary man.
Yeah, he is a big dude. But I believe he's going to be a couple weeks away from really getting some of those reps and looking at it. And everything I've heard so far is everything seems to be on plan. But yeah, I've seen him, and he is massive. And as I've already brought up, the one thing I've noticed from these guys like Desjardins and Dino Boyd, like these guys are big, man. It's a big offensive line. I've noticed that for sure.
So in a general sense, based on, the offseason that the Red Blacks had, what you're seeing so far, are you expecting this team to be better, significantly better? Are we gonna get a home win? Because that'd be pretty cool. Just in a general sense, what is your feeling on this team? How, what are you expecting out of them this year?
Yeah, personally, I think that this is going to be a better team in general. I think that they've added some good pieces throughout the offseason. Their DBs as well. Like their two biggest positions have been DB and wide receiver that I've noticed big time. But their defensive line has been really good as well, and they're good. I feel like this team is very well rounded, but it's very much an unknown. It's going to be very interesting to see when Jeremiah Masoli steps in at quarterback. I have them around an 8 to 9 win team, but I wouldn't be surprised to see them get to 10 to 11 wins. So I'm kind of in this. I could put them between 8 and 11 now, and I do believe they're going to win a home game. They would have won last week. You're subbing in your last minute guys.
Yeah,
it was a terrible loss to have your former global kicker and Jose Maltos have to kick it at the last minute. But I believe they were up 12 with like a minute something left in the game. So just a tough go in that sense. And it's preseason, but it was kind of just like, you got to be kidding me. Like you got to be kidding me right now. Like fans are just like, come on. So I do believe though that this team, like I said, I'll kind of go in the middle. I say that they'll be a 9-win team. I think that they could win the East. I think the East is a bit of a gong show this year. Yeah. I'm not really sold on Toronto, even though they won last year. So I do kind of want to, I don't want to say I'm favoriting Ottawa, but being around the team and seeing a difference out there in terms of depth and leadership and just guys that are kind of coming in with a different vibe, I think that this team will be around a 9-win team.
Yeah, and like the East has been pretty mediocre for a while now, right? Yeah. And it doesn't look like a whole lot has changed on that front. So, if you can get yourself to 7, 8, 9, 10, you're going to be in the mix, right? And this team playing as poorly as it did last year was still in the mix until like August or September, going, well, if we won the next 3, you'd have that last playoff spot. And that should not be the case with a team that bad, but the division was that bad. So we'll see, man. I'm ready for some football. I'm ready for the CFL to get up and going. I always find myself excited this time of year. Once camps are up and running, you start seeing all the social media content and the reports on who's doing what. I'm fired up, man. I'm ready for some CFL football.
Yeah, and just such fun vibes. Even though Friday was a preseason game, it was nice to get out to TD Place again. It was a beautiful night. It was nice. It was I wouldn't say it was packed, but it was pretty busy there. But just the vibes and the feel around them. When you get around Lansdowne, and just everything in kind of the glebe.
Bit of a buzz, right?
Just a different buzz. The bars are packed. Like you can't get a spot anywhere in Craft, and it's like everything's busy and packed after the games, and it's just a good night. It's a good Friday night. I love Friday night football at TD Place. It's awesome.
I can get a spot at Craft. There's a TCA table at Craft.
That's right. I was going to say, you got the easy in.
That's it, man. So I think that's about it for this one, man. We'll circle back to you here not too distant future because there's some interesting fight stuff that we need to get to here down the road as well. I will ask you before.
Can we complain about how terrible it has been the last few cards?
And honestly,
I'm missing I need a UFC fix in here.
Seriously, man. And the next one next weekend doesn't look all that exciting either. But I will ask you, I guess, just quickly before we wrap, because we talked about it a few months ago when you were on. The first episode of this season of The Ultimate Fighter went on Tuesday, and we talked about this being an opportunity to use Conor McGregor as one of the coaches. Could he breathe some life back into that series? Does he have enough star power left to float that series? It's him and Michael Chandler as the coaches. Did you watch episode 1? I'll be honest with you. I saw a couple tweets, the day or two leading up to it, reminding me that it was on. And I sort of thought Connor might be enough to get me to tune in. And when it came that night, I was just like, I don't really care. And that doesn't mean I won't circle back or watch it, but thus far, Connor wasn't enough to hook me. Did you catch episode 1?
I did, yeah.
Okay.
And
was it any
mainly
good?
Because Connor is, Connor's kind of like the Tiger Woods or something, like not the exact same extent, but I always want to see when Connor is going to do something. But
Connor's good TV.
Yeah, and I want to see how serious he really is about fighting again. Because that's the thing. Like, as much as we're waiting to see, usually the Ultimate Fighter coaches are supposed to fight. Mm-hmm. Well, there's no scheduled fight for these two guys to fight anytime
Honestly,
soon.
yeah.
I haven't even heard if McGregor's even entered USADA yet, so we don't even know if this fight is going to happen in this calendar year or not. So I'm kind of interested to see that.
Yeah, it's normally supposed to be 6 months, right, in the pool?
Yeah, and that's the thing. And you have to be able to test negative, I think, twice before you're even while you're in the pool.
People who don't file or don't follow fights, you have to, when you're not fighting, when you're off, if you think you're retired or whatever the hell you're doing, you don't have to report to the drug companies, or not drug companies, I've said that terribly, but the steroid. Yeah, exactly. And you don't have to do any of that. If you want to fight, you have to have been in the testing pool for 6 months. So
with 2 negative tests.
Yeah, and normally it gets pretty well reported when someone has re-entered the pool, and there's no indication at all that Conor McGregor has re-entered the testing pool. And so if he did it tomorrow, the earliest we're talking is what, July, August, September, October, December? Like,
yeah, that's what I mean.
Yeah, and that's supposed to be how you end these Ultimate Fighter series, is like the two guys who are going to finish the series strong, they're going to fight, and the two coaches are going to fight, and that's your big card. And this is, to me, pretty useless if Conor isn't going to fight at the end of it. Like, that's half the appeal.
Well, and that's where I was like, I don't know. Like, I want to get hyped about this season. I don't love the format either. They've done it like kind of veterans versus prospects. So guys that have been in the UFC before, like Brad Katona, like he was a Canadian fighter, won the Ultimate Fighter. But then he had one of his last fights, I believe, was in Ottawa when I was there covering it at the time. And that was 2019, and then he kind of just disappeared. And he was undefeated at the time too, but he was just a very kind of a boring fighter. But they're doing that versus guys that are young and upcoming guys, and it was an interesting format. But in terms of what it's been, The Ultimate Fighter is not the show it once was, which was exciting and fun on Spike TV. Bleeps were happening, fights were happening, like things were going on. Now that it's on TSN and it's kind of controlled by the UFC, it's very corny. There's so much Dana in it that I don't need to have. But then, like, what really
some cheese too, right in the background. So we're learning about the guys' kids and their families. Like a little bit of that is fine, but it's a bit much now.
No, I like it in a sense, but I like it more when it's not the veterans versus whatever.
Yes.
I like it because I like learning about these fighters, right? You kind of know where they come from. One of my favorite fighters in the Ultimate Fighter of the season I watched 2 seasons ago is Brian Battle, and I think he's done a great job. But his story, you learn a bit about him and his wife, and then you see him coming to the UFC, and he's got some crazy knockouts. It's like this guy was kind of boring when he fought on the Ultimate Fighter. He ended up winning, but he wasn't super exciting.
Yeah.
And I'm like, all right, I'm down with this. Like, this guy's crazy, and he's been good. So it's like I kind of love that tie. But my biggest thing was, the guy on Conor's team goes into for his weigh-in day, official weigh-in day. Conor's not even there. And Michael Chandler takes a jab at it. He's like, well, great, your coach isn't even here on the day of weigh-ins. And it's just like, you know what? That right off the bat, episode 1, I'm like, okay, cool. All right, dude. Like, this guy doesn't
not fully engaged in this.
He's not even there to fully coach his guy. So I'm like, that kind of disappointed me a lot. But it's also like, I've kind of known that Conor's been this way for the last couple of years.
Yeah.
I don't believe he's very serious in fighting anymore. I think he lives off his name in the past more than he does any of the future.
Yep.
I don't believe. I believe he retired for a reason and wants to come back for a reason. And I don't want to say he's absolutely been, juicing up, but I'm going to lean to seeing his body and everything, and when he's fighting, like, he is just an absolutely different fighter than when you looked at the guy a couple years ago. He got massive.
He's suddenly a middleweight, or
yeah, he's huge, and I'm like, this guy, it's just, and whatever. Maybe he did really work and grind. I'll give him the benefit of the doubt until I 100% know, but something doesn't pass the smell test here, and the fact that he's not in USADA yet, and the fact, like I said, that he's just kind of lingering around. Like, he was there and he was part of the episode, but it really bothered me to see that he wasn't there for, the official weigh-in, right? The face-off. And, you got Michael Chandler there, and you got, like, Conor's coach is kind of chirping in and, like, kind of just, like, trying to give him some support. But it's like, you kind of leave your guy down. And it turned out that Conor's guy got knocked out basically right away. So it didn't even end up very good. It wasn't very fun. It's a different. I'm down to watch it because I love fighting in the UFC and learning about these guys and seeing the trails and how they like their journeys to the UFC and all that stuff. But it is completely different. So it's not like, oh man, I can't miss this episode. But more or less, I want to know who's fighting, who are the guys to watch, what's going on. So I was disappointed though with Connor not being there, and it kind of. I hope it changes throughout the rest of the season. But I don't know, man. The first episode, you're already not showing up to one of your guys' weigh-ins, and it's just like, all right, cool. And then like the big thing too is the day of the fight. It's like they show the fighters walking in and they're talking about it and they're excited. Then it's like, all right, pause, and it's like, here comes this big Lamborghini rolling in, and here comes Connor with his fancy suit. And he's dressed to the nines, and it's like, all right, dude, like this is so corny. Like I said, you got Dana White in there talking big time, super excited about these fighters. And it's like, all right, Dana, just listen, just enough out of you, enough out of Connor. Like if Connor's not really down to fight, I don't really care to hear from him either right now. So that was my disappointment, but I'm down to watch it. It is a good time right now because Succession and Barry and I believe Yellow Jackets is right there. They all just ended.
Everybody's
so my weekend of finishing things out. Yeah, it's a good summer to watch The Ultimate Fighter.
All right. See, I like that. I think that's legit. I like I said, I haven't watched it. I haven't decided I'm not watching it or anything like that. I just had other things going on that caught my attention a little more. And when I saw the tweets and the reviews and stuff the next day, it all said similar to what you're saying. Too much Dana, probably not enough Connor, and a few other people sort of not mimicking, but feeling what I was feeling, and that sometimes there's a little light on the fighting and a little heavy on the family stuff, the background stuff. But as you've correctly pointed out, that is part of the appeal, right? It's a reality show. You can't get people to care about these characters over the course of a full season if you don't tell people a little about them. So it's a tough balance to strike, but we'll see, man. I may circle back to it. We'll see kind of how things shake.
I'll let you know if it gets spicy and you need to tune in.
By all means, man. I appreciate that.
I got your number.
All right. So that's a good place to wrap this one up. Bunda, I appreciate you doing this as always, man. You bring the takes. We can always count on you there.
Oh, man, thank you for having me on once again.
I'm coming back to town. We need to get you in. We need to talk some fights. We need to have some in-person beers. So
maybe. Let's see you get in the water first, and then we'll see if you can leave that place.
Yeah, I don't know if my bag's ready to hit the May. I'm not sure. We'll see. It's hot weather. This lake is still pretty cold, so we'll see. As always, you can give Bunda a follow on social media at SteveBunda91. We'll make sure that is linked in the show notes. We are on social media at Tall Can Audio, and hope you'll subscribe wherever you're hearing us right now. Stick around. We got more awesome Red Blacks content, potentially a pretty big guest coming up. You should stick around to hear more about that. If you want to circle back, Nick Ashbourne, contributor at Sportsnet and Yahoo, had all kinds of interesting stuff on the Blue Jays back on episode 1122. All of that is available at tallcanaudio.com or wherever you're hearing us right now. For Steve Bunda, my name's Matt Robinson. We'll see you next time.
The hell is that?
Number one bullshit. Oh, number one bullshit.
Why are you so pissy?